And yes, we are going to be kicking off by talking about, this, the PlayStation Portal, which, for reasons that still baffle me, we managed to get this about a week after everybody else. But Sony eventually came through, and there's been a lot of interesting discourse on the internet surrounding the PlayStation Portal, and the question of whether remote play is up to it. And I mean, let's talk about the other reactions first from the various reviews. John, what's your sort of takeaway from the blanket coverage? Well, blanket, which involves everybody except Digital Foundry, it seems.
I mean, generally, based on watching the various reviews, everybody seemed to just kind of be like, it's okay, it works, but it's not great. Where it's,
I'd
it's
say
like
there
it
were
does
some positive reviews as well.
Yeah, IGN review was pretty positive.
I would say the reviews, they weren't negative, but it was like, this does what it says it's going to do, but it doesn't do it like super well, and it's extremely like bare bones, or it's literally what is written on the tin, as they say.
Yeah,
it just streams your PS5 stuff to this thing, but it uses remote play, so image quality suffers. And I have used the remote play feature on there, so I have experience with what remote play looks like. I just haven't seen it on the portal itself. But I mean, the reviews weren't bad. It's just, I think everybody came to the conclusion that it's a limited device. The image quality is fine, but not amazing. And it's kind of expensive for all that. It bums me because when you look at what Sony did in the past with handhelds, I know it's not meant to be a Vita or a PSP, right? But what you got at the time for those, and those beautiful packages for a similar price, and then you get this, it just, it's a little disappointing.
Yeah. Okay. What was your takeaway, Alex?
For me, I think it's what you want to do with the device is very important. Like what your actual goals are. You can't go into it with different expectations than what it can possibly fulfill. And I think if you go into it with lowered expectations of what you want to use it for, then you can actually find maybe some use for it for your specific lifestyle. At your home, maybe you have the PS5 in a room where someone works, or you want to play your PS5 games at night in bed. I can see that there's use for this thing. It's just a matter of whether at that point you want to pay the cost for it to do it through the dedicated device, or do remote play in some other fashion. And that's totally up to you at that point. But I think the one thing that you could probably illuminate us on more, Rich, is like based upon like your past experience with streaming with other devices, or just streaming in general, because you've done like a lot of our like streaming content here, videos covering streaming platforms at DF. Like, what is the experience like from your perspective in comparison to what you've seen in the past?
Alex, though, before we get to Rich, I have a question for you.
What's up?
Having little experience with these devices, do you think it's, even you said keep your expectations in check, do you think it's fair for somebody going into this to expect the PlayStation Portal to match or exceed the experience of the Wii U gamepad from 2012? Was that a fair expectation, would you say?
Given the amount of years that have transitioned between then and now, I would hope that it is better than the Wii U gamepad.
Okay.
That would be my personal hope.
Now let's get to Rich.
Well, I think we should put that comparison to the test in the actual review, which I've only just literally started. But yeah, I mean, what we're talking about there is a device that was literally built from the ground up to support that kind of second screen experience, right? Whereas this is just basically a hardware add-on to a software feature that doesn't ever seem to have particularly been a priority from Sony, right? So I'll tell you sort of my experience with the PlayStation Portal so far. Basically got the box, unboxed it. It's I think it's probably just as well there were no unboxing embargoes for this one, because it is literally the device and a USB cable in a box. There's nothing more to it, which is kind of like the way I like it, because I mean it's a box. It's not as if it's an event as such. Anyway, plug it in, connect to your internet router. Going to go with John's pronunciation there. Connect to the router and hook up to your PlayStation 5. And here's the thing, right? Obviously, the Portal has its own UI, which is natively generated by whatever SoC's in there. And to begin with, it's very much mimicking the PlayStation 5 interface. And then you remote play into your PlayStation 5, and then you get the streamed version of the interface, which is, first impressions are, well, it's basic remote play, horrible banding on there on that interface. It doesn't look great at all. But go into gameplay and it's actually, well, how can I describe it? Fine, okay, does the job. It's far from an optimal solution, though. What can I say? You can see, I mean, you get quite a big screen there. I think it's an 8-inch LCD. LCD panel quality is acceptable. It looks okay. Blacks aren't fantastic, but it's LCD. Next to the OLED, not great, but next to an LCD, absolutely fine. But the thing is, the quality of the streaming isn't fantastic. I don't understand why there isn't a higher bitrate option. Maybe it's a limitation within the SoC, but I'm sure it can do better. And so you get kind of like a smearing of detail in motion, which doesn't look great, but it's acceptable. Now, if you can get a great idea of the image quality without buying a Portal, just by loading up Remote Play on whatever device you have available, because it is Remote Play. And that was the first thing that hit me about it, which was there's no secret sauce here, because that's what you kind of expect from a console from Sony.
Device, right? Yeah.
Yeah, there was lots of conjecture. Maybe it will switch into a special Portal mode that, maybe has higher bit rates, maybe connects directly to the machine rather than via the router. I've seen no evidence of that so far, but literally I've had maybe 2 hours of play with it. I guess the next thing we can
seems like
talk
a fair
about,
expectation, though, right?
yeah.
They're selling this for $200. Like, why is it not a more bespoke solution? Why wouldn't they engineer something into the PS5 to do this correctly?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting device. It's a bit unwieldy, but it is effectively exactly what it looks like, which is a DualSense controller with a honking great screen in the middle of it. But, the benefit of it is that you do get the full DualSense functionality, right? Which is a nice thing to have that you won't get on other forms of remote play. So this is a nice thing to have. But beyond that, it is just remote play. And maybe, it was just expectations going too high going into this one. And, there have been some posts on social media. People are delighted with their PlayStation Portals, and they've done like off-screen photography showing the Portal running side by side with the PlayStation 5 hooked into an HDMI screen. And, owing to the way it was shot, it looks like there's next to no latency. However, obviously there is latency because it's remote play and it doesn't seem to have any kind of secret source attached to it. And there's a very easy way to test this. I'm not the first creator to do this. You just load up Gran Turismo 7 and then put the Portal and your TV into the same viewport, take a picture, and then you can compare the timer on screen, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I did. So, the stuff you're seeing here, it's basically my LG CX, which, John, you said in game mode has, 12.75 milliseconds of lag?
I think it's like 13.6 milliseconds now with the current firmware.
Really?
On the CX.
Okay. And you can see that there's about 60 millisecond difference between the timer that's shown on the Portal screen and the timer that's shown on the CX screen. So, in terms of the comparison between my gameplay experience, it's going to be like, I don't know, like 60 milliseconds or thereabouts, about 3 frames. What's actually more telling is that when you actually play the game with the speakers on both screens active, you can hear the echo effect, right? The delay from the almost lagless TV, and then the time it takes to get to the Portal. There's a definite echo there. So there is latency. Anybody saying there isn't latency, just turn your speakers up.
Actually, Rich, that's a funny point, because at the time when Wii U released, it was often the opposite, where TVs and AV receivers tended to be a little bit slower. So you'd actually hear the Wii U play first in the gamepad, and then you could hear your sound. So it kind of
That's
created
great.
this weird echo. Now it's reversed on the portal.
That's hilarious. And actually, it reminds me of when I think it was Tom. We sent Tom to a Wii U press trip. And I said, here's an interesting idea, Tom. Just film the screen and the Wii U controller in the same shot. And we'll be able to see the difference in latency by counting the frames between, certain events that happen on one screen and then the other. And, if we were being particularly cynical, it could have been a bit of gotcha journalism. Look at the lag on this Wii U gamepad. The screen, this is obviously going to be 2012, right? 2013?
2012. It would have been
Probably
2012.
terrible screen.
Yeah. 2012. Game mode obviously wasn't active on the screen that Nintendo were using, and the Wii U gamepad was 100 milliseconds faster than the TV.
That's so noticeable. My goodness,
dude. The Wii, seriously, for all the things people have said about the Wii U, the gamepad experience was really phenomenal. It was so responsive,
absolutely,
so fast, and it looked great. It really felt like it was running natively on that thing. Yeah.
I mean, it was bespoke hardware end to end, and
For sure.
But it was still using, Wi-Fi, and obviously,
right.
I suspect it would have been using much. I'm not really too sure about bandwidth. Actually, I'd have to look into that because compression wouldn't have been as good back in the day. But It looked great, right? It looked great on that screen. It was downscaled to 480p, obviously, but even so, I mean, this is 4K downscaled to 1080p. So yeah, there's obviously some compromises there, but even so, I mean, it definitely had fewer compression issues than the PlayStation Portal has, and PlayStation Portal, it's fine. It does the job. I think what's something that's working in its favor here is that basically almost every game on PlayStation 5 you can run at 60 frames per second, right? And you inherently get a lower level of input lag because of that. And it kind of becomes, circa 30 frames per second in terms of input lag response on the Portal. And it does the job. I played some Marvel Spider-Man 2 last night. Did the job just fine. Something which I would like to point out is that I was doing some B-roll just for this piece, not for the review, just for this discussion. And I was playing Alan Wake 2 and the Portal just suddenly disconnected for no reason. And it was like, which was a bit odd because, my PlayStation 5 is literally there and my router, you can't see, it's not quite in shot, but it's just to the right of that PCB over there. It's just over there. So I'm literally maybe 1.2 meters away from the router. Sorry, John.
That's funny. No, so I'm actually an interesting thing you mentioned regarding. So you get 60 FPS on this thing, and first of all, it is cool that there's so many 60 FPS games this gen. Just by dropping that little piece of knowledge, you're highlighting the successes of this gen. Is that most games are 60 frames per second now. But beyond that, when you're playing at 60 FPS on the Portal, does it actually produce even frame persistence? Because this is a problem I've had with remote play on other devices, is that the actual video stream doesn't look as smooth as it should. It's close, but it has it's a little jittery.
Yeah,
is
actually,
it the same
we've got this. Well, this will lead us on. It will segue us seamlessly to this question from someone on the DF supporter program. Is it me? Or the frame rate of the PS Portal is quite inconsistent, even on the same home network as the PlayStation 5. I'm no DF expert, but gameplay definitely looks smoother on my TV than the Portal. This makes me wonder, does it actually detect it is on the same network and transmits on the local network, or does it go through the internet anyway? I was testing no more than 1 meter from my router and with the PlayStation 5 on Ethernet. Yeah, actually something that's what I'd like to clarify is that my PlayStation 5 was connected to the router via Ethernet as well. I suspect a lot of people are going to be using Wi-Fi, which will add further latency. That's something we'll test, obviously. But to answer someone's question and to answer John, it's remote play. So that effect that you've seen in remote play persists onto the Portal. and it's not attractive. It looks
Well,
like something's off.
I only asked that because, testing this on like a phone or something, like there's other things going on in there. Who knows if the application itself is struggling.
Getting all the juice it needs.
Right. Yeah. And this is a dedicated device. So that's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
But it sounds like what you're confirming is that no, it is not improved.
I mean, it does it on PC as well, which is, it's no shortage of resources there. It's got a lot more resources than the Portal. Yeah, I mean, that is something that you need to factor in. Most people will probably just dismiss it as, just something a bit odd.
Basically what you're saying
about.
is the Portal is really awesome for people that love playing Bloodborne still, where they like lower input response
you love that
and they
Bloodborne.
love bad frame pacing. So if you
there's no 60 FPS on Bloodborne, so
that's true.
That's
oh my God.
Someone to try.
Thanks to
Doing
Lance.
Bloodborne over the network, do it. Someone do it. It's going to be bad.
That's what I kind of think at the moment. There's a lot more testing to do. It's okay, but unless you really want DualSense controls, you could just use your mobile phone. There may even be latency advantages with a mobile phone because you could run, a lot of screens these days are 120 hertz. Possibly there'll be a latency advantage. It's something else to test.
My question though is, do we know anything about the SoC powering the Portal?
No, I did see on the internet that somebody noted that their router identified the Portal as a Sony Xperia when it connected, which I thought was quite interesting. Could just be a mobile phone SoC or just running the Xperia
I guess
stack.
that's kind of what I'm wondering is like, if this thing gets cracked open at some point, it could potentially be more interesting, right?
Hopefully.
Yeah, I think there's potential there. It depends what the SoC is, but even so, there's no reason why. There's some weird decisions here. There's no reason why it couldn't have been used for PlayStation Cloud streaming, which does exist now. Which I'll try to find some time to take a look at that at some point. I think my overall sort of takeaway so far is it's okay, but exactly what I was expecting. With no additional,
flourishes of any
bespoke
sort.
flourishes. Yeah.
Here's the real bummer: is like they could have used this to also celebrate the legacy of their handhelds by allowing it to natively play like PSP and Vita games on this
via
thing,
emulation or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm sure the SoC has enough power to handle that, right? So that could have been
and
really
it
special.
would upsell people to the higher PlayStation Classic. PlayStation Plus tiers that support the classic games.
Absolutely. They could have fed that right in there, and it would have been kind of a cool marketing play. It would have got people talking. It would have made this device a lot more exciting and appealing.
So there's a lot to do here because you can use it outside of your home. You can use it on public internet. I mean, there was a report I saw that said that it didn't have a web browser built in, so you couldn't really attach it to public Wi-Fi, which requires a web browser login. Something else I need to test. So there's a lot going on with the PlayStation Portal. I think it is essentially a device for use at home, really, though. Maybe if you need to access your PlayStation 5, or maybe if you're playing an extremely slow game that doesn't require decent response, it would probably work, but that's all up in the air. We could always take some supporter questions, though, because there's a fair few of them. Let's take a look at this one from Bjork Tribe. For the PlayStation Portal reviews, I've noticed a lot that say things like my internet speed is X, or I ran these graphically intensive games and the lag seemed barely noticeable, but both of these points have nothing to do with how the device performs. Seems many reviewers don't understand that the only thing that matters is your own internet performance. This can mislead a lot of lay people when making buying decisions for themselves or others. Is this misinformation a failure on Sony's side for not making expectations clear? Is it the reviewers and their editors who don't understand the technology they work with? Should Sony have published approved hardware for Wi-Fi routers and an explainer on how network congestion and the layout of your house can impact performance? Long question here, but I am always impacted when people are at best ignorant of the products they are using, and at worst giving a glowing review because they were either paid to do so. Look, that doesn't really happen. Or scared they may negatively impact their relationship with the product's owner. Thanks, gents. Yeah, I mean, it is a streaming device, and I think this is possibly something else I need to look at, because one of the key things with a console, right, is that the manufacturer has overseen every single component of the user experience and optimized it, right? This is the advantage of a fixed platform, which is that every console is the same. Now, Sony has released this device here, where its performance inherently they have no control over, because it's not connecting, as far as we know, directly to the PlayStation 5. It's going to your internet router, which means that the device is only going to be as good as the hardware that you've got in your house. Maybe that's why they've got low bit rates and stuff like that. But that is, for me, something that's fundamental and is a potential problem, a big one, because we're seeing reports now on Twitter of people that are having very, very different experiences with the PlayStation Portal. It's not the fault of your PlayStation 5. Some might say it's not the fault of the Portal. It's the fact that there's this box that sits in between the two devices that Sony has no control over whatsoever. And it's the same with cloud streaming. On my old internet connection, fiber, about 30 megabits, I could never use GeForce Now because it just didn't work with my equipment. There's nothing wrong with GeForce Now, nothing wrong with the receiver. It was the fact that the internet connection was, or indeed the hardware that was in between the two devices there, was just not up to snuff. That's kind of what worries me here. And similarly, what happens if, your router's under heavy load? This is something else I guess I should test is, let's say I'm downloading from Steam at 500 megabits per second. Will that have any kind of impact on streaming performance to another device on the same device? There's a lot of unknowns here, and you can kind of see that when...
I was going to say also, if they take into account your house, apartment, whatever, the walls in this house where I'm at, they are extremely thick. It's an old German house, so it's like these stone thick walls. Wi-Fi signals do not travel through these walls very well, which basically means Wi-Fi devices. I have to use repeaters all over the place to get Wi-Fi anywhere in here, right?
Yeah, so which would kill portal performance.
Absolutely. So like in my case, unless I'm sitting like in the living room, it's probably not going to even function
very well
properly anyway.
Right. Yeah.
And I've been testing this because of all that PC VR headset streaming I've been doing, so I can see exactly the limits of what I can and cannot do with streaming Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's so many unknowns that Sony, can't accommodate for. And I haven't seen it yet, but, I have had disconnections even in the same room. But the point is that maybe there should be some sort of on-screen information bar that tells you, is your equipment up to snuff? Are there problems on the network at the moment? I'm not seeing any of that so far, but, as I said, it's early days of the PlayStation Portal.
They really needed to allow direct connection to the PS5. Like, that's the thing.
Yeah,
right?
I'm a bit baffled as to why.
That is so weird that it doesn't. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to give it a go. Maybe, maybe there is something more than meets the eye here, but it certainly seems like remote play as per the norm so far. Another question here from Everyone's a Winner. Hey DF, exclamation point. My biggest takeaway from PS Portal reviews was actually just seeing how well the Steam Deck works as a PlayStation 5 remote play device already. I can 100% see how a dedicated device is better than using your phone with a backbone, but should folks thinking about the Portal save up longer and just get a Steam Deck? Won't have all the DualSense tricks and it's heavier, but it will do just as it will just do so much more in addition to streaming PS5 games. PS Portal just seems destined to be e-waste way sooner than any other mainline gaming device from Sony. I think that's going a bit far. There's a lot they could do with this device, and we've already talked about it, right? Emulation on the system itself, cloud streaming. It's a pretty good device. The screen is obviously going to be better than Steam Deck's LCD because that truly is a lousy display. It's got the DualSense functionality. it's okay. It's a decent device, but I can actually see there is a lot to sort of consider when factoring in the price of it, because $200 for a DualSense with a strapped-on screen is pushing it. They couldn't have pushed it any higher, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Any further points or questions about PlayStation Portal before we move on?
Question: how does it feel in your hands in comparison to the Steam Deck?
It's lighter, I think. Yes, it's lighter. It's fine. It's kind of odd simply because of how wide it is. It's wider than the Steam Deck. It's perfectly comfortable to use. I think it's okay. It's perfectly fine. Which kind of sums up the whole experience, really. It's okay. It's perfectly fine. But if you're looking for something that's, an enthusiast level device, this isn't really for you.